What I started to find is the story of the worst professional moment of my life and the public
Hmm.
humiliation and the incredible dark energy, wound energy, trauma energy, activation energy that it generated just stopped feeling true to
Hmm.
the actual beautiful purpose-driven spirit of this company I had built. And
Hmm.
it just like as I was like trotting this story out in public settings, I started to feel it less. And when I
Hmm.
started to feel it less, it started to be less effective
Right.
because
I
I was
get that.
more that's sort of when it goes from authentic storytelling to brand.
Welcome to the Expert in You podcast, the show where we have real conversations with established founders, firm owners, and B2B experts selling their expertise as services. We talk about what's happening now inside experienced businesses where positioning, influence, and growth directly affect opportunities and contracts. I'm Ann Carden. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Expert in You podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carden. And today, my guest is Dan Grech, and he is the CEO and the founder of YBYS, which is Your Business is Your Story. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I have not really had anyone on that I can think of that we really dove into how powerful story can be to build companies and how to utilize it in companies. And so we're going to dive into that. But we also have kind of some cool stories to share about some things that have happened out there with large companies that you are very aware of. And I think we're going to talk about that just a little bit about how companies sometimes change directions and it doesn't go well. Let's just say that. So we'll talk about that. But Dan, very quickly, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit more about what you do, how you got here, and then who you serve?
Absolutely. My name is Dan Grech. I'm the founder and CEO of IBIS, which is spelled YBYS. Your business is your story. And I'm the author of a book of the same name, Your Business is Your Story. And that book is a handbook for founder led, purpose driven companies to be able to leverage their story, why they do what they do, and why it matters as a strategic growth asset. So this includes, of course, marketing, but also sales. It also incorporates how you hire, how you raise money, who you partner with, how you interact with the community, and also the story you tell yourself, which helps you with sustainability and resilience. And so, what I am excited to share with you and your audience today is one thing that we all have is a compelling story. And most of us operate in fields or industries where there's a lot of competition. And your personal story, your highly specific reasons for why you do what you do and why that work matters to you and to the world immediately become differentiators in a competitive workspace. And what it allows you to do, to borrow your phrase, is it allows you to be seen, chosen, and paid at a higher level.
He just took that from the back of my,
I
yeah.
did borrow that from you. I mean, essentially, it's really critical. Like, we know from lived experience that if you want to get paid at a higher level,
Mhm.
you have to differentiate yourself as kind of a luxury good. And in
Oh,
order for you to be a luxury good, one of the ways you do that is through your unique set of motivations, backgrounds, and experiences that
mhm.
justify a higher price point and differentiate you from all of the other pretenders. And so, obviously, your story alone isn't going to do that, but it is an incredibly powerful way to do that and to
Mhm.
build trust and credibility. And I would say most business owners don't leverage it to the fullest extent that they can. And so, that my mission in the world is to help small businesses anywhere from a million to 50 million founder led businesses to help them leverage this hidden asset that all of us have, but few of us use well.
Yeah. I mean, I love this. And I think story is so powerful. I can't tell you how many times on a podcast, I've been asked, how did you get started? And how did you get here? And all of that kind of thing. But I do want to just I always like to put myself in sort of the shoes of the audience. What questions would they be asking? And one of the things that I would like to ask you is, the marketing phrase, nobody cares. Nobody cares, right? They don't care about you. How do you work a story so that it's not about you, but it is a way to influence the buyer? Because at the end of the day, they're not really buying you, they're buying what you can do for them, right? And so, how do you have that shift in the story so that that can be a natural byproduct or a result of the story? Is that making sense what I'm
Oh,
asking?
yeah. I would actually say that this is a limiting belief that I encounter all the time. The best articulation of this is the wonderful book Story Brand.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Miller kind of coined the phrase, the customer is the hero and you're their guide.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a marketing framework. And he's 100% right about this, that it's not about you, it's about them. And if you look at StoryBrand, if you actually read it, he's very clear that this is a marketing framework. So what's happened is people overinterpreted this into an approach to running your whole business and all of the relationships with all of the different stakeholders that you have. And that is a massive miss and overinterpretation of what is actually being said in the book. So the book is a great guide, and I highly recommend it if you want to write a website.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to think about it is this: when you're writing a website, you want to really focus on the problem you're solving for your customer.
Right.
And that's really the foundation of your go-to-market strategy, your marketing is like if you really understand the pain that they're in and the way you can solve for it and why you're better than anyone else at solving for it, you'll be successful in your marketing campaign. I will add that, Luke Skywalker didn't hire some rando off the street. He hired a Jedi to help him.
Mm-hmm.
So you do matter in this equation. You need to establish that you have the credentials and the experience to actually help them solve this problem. So just articulating the problem, especially in the age of AI, is not enough. You need to prove that you have the human background and experience. But that's just marketing. Now you're on the one-on-one sales call,
Right.
right? That's where your personal story becomes essential. You're on a hiring call and you're trying to establish, does this person share in my values? You
Mm.
become central and your
Right.
values. When you're raising money from an investor or convincing a bank to lend you money, the C is character, right?
Right.
They're investing in you. And that's what I want
Mm-hmm.
you guys who are listening to understand is if you think of this as a marketing framework, what I'm saying, I wouldn't work with me. I would work with Russell, with a story brand. But if you're thinking about a whole business operating system,
Mm.
that's where I come in.
I love that. And I wanted to see that differentiation because there is so much out there around story and story brand and all of that. And there's story brand coaches and there's story brand consultants, and they're out there singing that. But you really are talking about something different. One thing that I really want to hit on is you said, in the age of AI. And right now, people are looking for authentic. And one of the things that I had really done
Yeah.
a better job of doing is bringing my expertise and story into everything that I'm doing in my marketing so that it does show up more authentic. It's not the jargon. And so I totally get what you're saying. And I totally believe what you're saying. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wanted to see the difference there.
Well, it's
And
really,
your,
I mean, I actually think, these ideas become almost viral. And this notion of it's not about you, it's about them is like really good marketing advice and really bad business advice. And I all the time encounter these business owners that use this as an excuse to essentially hide
Mhm,
because they're humble or they don't want to be out there. They're not doing it for the accolades.
mhm,
I mean, I believe that fundamentally business is a generous act.
You're
Like,
serving. I mean, that you're
yeah.
selling value in some way, shape, or form, a product or
And
value.
if you're not, guess what, Anne? You're going to go out of business.
Right. You're
Like,
not going to be in business. That's
yeah,
right.
it's like the whole
Mm-hmm.
definition of product market fit,
Mm-hmm.
which is the core requirement of a small business, is that
Mm-hmm.
you are serving an unmet need.
Yeah.
And
And
who does that? People who are service oriented and purpose
right.
driven. And
Mm-hmm.
that's who I love to serve. And what I like to tell them is like, look, you have two options. You can do it the hard way or the easier way, and it's up to you. The hard way is cold calling and
Mm-hmm.
undifferentiated product and competing on price. And the
Mm-hmm.
easier way is to lean into your authentic purpose and your authentic story and get that out there to every stakeholder so that
Mm-hmm.
you attract the people who are aligned with you and you repel the ones who aren't.
Yeah, that's so good. And I do believe too that it is going to become even more important in the future because of AI,
Yes.
because of competition. It's anything that you can do to differentiate yourself in the market from your competitors is something your competitors won't be doing. And so all of those things are going to help you in your business. But the other piece of it is to me, it brings such a human component or a human element to a business. And one of the things you said to me, Dan, is it is separate from a brand. And so I would love for you to talk about that a little bit because a lot of people associate story. In fact, a lot of brand developers bring story into building out the brand. But that's not really what you're talking about. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about something even on a deeper level, where it's really more around your value system, why you started, sort of your founder story. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. To do this in a metaphorical way, your story is the foundation of your business. And just to be really clear, I have a very particular definition of business story. It's why you do what you do and why it matters, your
Mm-hmm.
origin story and your larger purpose, your why. That is the foundation of your business. It's the foundation of all of your relationships, including with customers. And then your brand is like the roof on the house,
Mm-hmm.
which helps protect you and guide, give shape to what you're offering.
It's your
Um,
storefront. That's the way I look at it. Your
yeah,
brand.
the foundation of your business is literally part of every communication, even
Mm-hmm.
internal. Whereas your brand is your storefront, it's your roof, it's what the
Mm-hmm.
sort of you show to the public. Another way I've heard brand defined, which I really love, is your brand is if your marketing is what you say about yourself, your brand is what other people say about you.
Right. That's true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that. And brand is important. And brand definitely is a function of the foundation and the story you tell, but they're just really distinct. And I think many businesses kind of don't even tell the foundational story.
Mm-hmm.
They just rely on an agency to help them define the brand. And when that brand is inauthentic, when that brand is a marketing invention, when it's a myth or a fiction,
Mm-hmm.
they've just created a very high bar for themselves. They've made things harder for themselves. Whereas if
Mm-hmm.
the brand is rooted in their authentic story, it's just way easier to be on brand.
Right.
You're
No, that
just
makes
telling
so
the
much
truth at
sense.
that point.
Right. Yes. And the value just really aligns then with your whole purpose and everything that you're doing. No, I totally get what you're saying. One of the things you talked about, Dan, is you were talking about kind of two types of energy in a story. And I thought that was really interesting. I had never heard that before. It logically makes so much sense. You were talking about a dark energy and a light energy. How does that come into? Well, I know how it comes into the story because you explained it to me, but I would love for you to tell the audience, your process around that or your thought around that, because this is where I think a lot of people make big mistakes when they're bringing their story into their business. And so I'll just let you talk about that.
I call it light and dark energy, and it would be very easy for you to assume dark energy is bad and light energy is good. And I don't actually believe that at all. So let me kind of explain the framework and then the shift I often see in entrepreneurs. So I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say most business owners are basically were motivated to start their business due to some kind of wound. It's true for me.
It was true
And
for me
that,
too. Hmm.
yeah, I'll tell you mine and you tell me yours, Anne. So mine was,
Hmm.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. My first business was selling blow in high school,
Hmm.
blow pops. Um, sorry, that's a little joke. But no, I was very successful. I was the candy man, and I was a pretty, middle class kid in a very poor, in a very rich school. And they used to call me the richest poor kid in Harriton High School because I was so successful at selling quarter blow pops. And then it just started getting a little risky because I was getting mugged because I was carrying so much cash. And so
Oh my goodness.
my mom, who was my supplier, put a stop to it. Anyway, that's my first business, and it was so successful it had to be shut down. And I've been a part of five others. Some have been dramatic successes with exits. Some have been so spectacular a failure that they've been written about in books. I was part
Hmm.
of the first startup that Eric Ries of the Lean Startup did, and he wrote his famous book, The Lean Startup, talks about the business I was a part of with him. So that's my entrepreneurial journey.
Hmm.
And then in between, I had this amazing 15-year career as a journalist, at NPR, the show Marketplace with Kai Ryssdal. And then I was the news director of the NPR station in Miami. And then I got fired. And it was public. It was like published and it was like almost like a public humiliation. And from that wound became, the latest phase of my entrepreneurial journey and the
Hmm.
beginning of my one of my businesses. And so I would tell that story a lot about a wound that like there was so much hurt and financial need and ego and desire to prove myself. Like when you're publicly humiliated and it's published in a newspaper, you
Hmm.
feel like you've got a little chip on your shoulder for your next endeavor. And so a lot that drove me for years. And it helped
Hmm.
me create what I think was like a really beautiful business. And so I'll tell you what happened next in a sec, but what was your wound story, Anne?
Yeah, I am. And actually, when I really think about it, my wound story is for every business I built. So this is my sixth and seventh business I'm in. I've sold the five previous, but every one of those businesses came out of a wound. So the first one, I left my corporate career, my corporate income to stay home and raise my babies. And financially, my husband was working, but the math did not math, and we were struggling financially. So I started looking for a way to make money. Now, that was I don't know, 37 years ago. It was a lot of years ago. But even my second business started when I exited that first one. I had gained a lot of weight. And my second business started in the fitness industry. And again, that was, I don't know, 25, 28 years ago. But that started because I had gained a lot of weight. I had to get in shape just to feel better, not to be depressed. Like, what's my next thing going to be? And so
Right,
every single one, and even when
right.
I expanded my businesses, I expanded out of necessity because of competition and moving a different direction. And so all of those things, every one of them came out of a hardship. It was driving me crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Like often we're kind of like customer zero. Like
Hmm.
we're solving a problem. So in my case, I was like a journalist who needed to reinvent as a marketer, and I needed a boot camp to help me do it. And so my business was basically a mid-career marketing boot camp.
Mm.
And so I was sort of solving a problem that I had, but that a
Hmm.
lot of other people in my position had as well. Whether they're a business owner that's struggling with marketing or a mid-career professional that needs
Hmm.
to learn a new industry. So that is the wound story. And then what I found over time is I built this beautiful business. It was called BizHack Academy, and the wound started to feel less relevant after a while. Like the firing and the public humiliation didn't really seem to be as relevant anymore.
Yeah, it was just
Um,
part of the story. It was
it's
just
just it's just
how
what
you
got kind
started.
of
Yeah.
what got me started. So as I was telling this story about the starting up of the business, I kept like rehashing the worst moment of my professional life. And it
Mm.
just started to feel really out of alignment with the business, this beautiful business that I had built and
Hmm.
all the people I was helping. And so I realized that I needed a new story. And so the story that I
Ah.
landed on was, it's a coaching and training business, and my grandfather's On my mother's side was a 35-year school teacher at Central High School in Philadelphia, the second oldest public high school in America. And on my father's side was a coach, a professional soccer coach in La Liga.
Hmm.
So famous that when he died, they had a moment of silence for him in Camp Nou, which is the famous Barcelona stadium.
Mm.
So I have basically two very famous grandfathers, one who is a teacher and one who is a soccer coach. And the business that I built really was honoring that legacy. And
Hmm.
so then I just started telling that story instead.
Hmm.
And it did a couple of things. One is that's a light energy story, by the way. So
Right.
the based on legacy and love
Hmm.
versus the dark energy story, which is about fear and trauma. What I started to find is the story of the worst professional moment of my life and the public
Hmm.
humiliation and the incredible dark energy, wound energy, trauma energy, activation energy that it generated just stopped feeling true to
Hmm.
the actual beautiful purpose-driven spirit of this company I had built. And
Hmm.
it just like as I was like trotting this story out in public settings, I started to feel it less. And when
Hmm.
I started to feel it less, it started to be less effective
Right.
because I
I
was
get that.
more that's sort of when it goes from authentic storytelling to brand.
Mm.
It just became a line. And so what
Yeah.
I had to do is I had to go back to the well of my personal experience and ask, okay, so why did I build this specific business? And that's when I connected back to my grandfathers and the legacy of teaching and
Hmm.
coaching. And that for me is a forever story. Like I will never get tired of talking about my granddads
Hmm.
and the amazing legacy. And, literally every time I talk about them, I literally feel their eyes on me from heaven
Hmm.
and they feel proud.
I love this. And I want to ask you something though. So, one thing that I do is with every business that I have built, I still had the origin story, right? I still left my corporate job and my corporate income, and that's how I became an entrepreneur. So, I still tell that story. But when I went into all these different businesses, there was another reason why I started that business.
Correct.
And so my story changed. I kept the foundational story. This is how I became an entrepreneur, but then everything else got collapsed. The rest of the story got collapsed. And then I expanded on the story that was relevant to the business I was in right now.
Correct.
So, my question for you is how does a company, of course, if you're working with $50 million companies, it's going to be a different story. Literally, like it's going to be a more foundational that's going to stick. But if you're talking about entrepreneurs that often build multiple businesses, you've done it, I've done it. Do you see that the story does need to change with the business that they're in so that people still feel like it's relatable and it's relevant? In other words, if I went all in on my very first business, it's not really relevant to what I'm doing today. It's just a piece of how I got started in entrepreneurship,
Correct.
how I built something global and sold it. And so, yeah, that's my question for you. So,
Yeah,
where
so
did that shift?
there's kind of two components to your question. Your actual question is if you're a serial entrepreneur and you're starting a new business, kind of implicit is like, do you need to tell a different startup story?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is a resounding yes. Like
Mm-hmm.
the startup story of your previous business will not work.
Right.
And the reason why is because you're solving a different problem for a different target audience.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a different industry even.
Right.
Does that mean that you're lying or no, it's just you're emphasizing different facets of your rich background to serve the new business. So like when I'm working with a client, if they say, actually, let's do the startup story for this business, I have to start over because the startup story, the origin story of one business
Mm.
is just different than the origin story of the other. And I'll give you like a really
Yeah.
concrete example. So this isn't abstract, but then the other piece, which is what we were talking about earlier, is the evolution of the story
Mm-hmm.
for the same business. So the story isn't static, it evolves as the company
Ah,
does.
I see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the example I gave you earlier was about an evolution of a story for a marketing training company that I ran. from
Mm-hmm.
one of dark to light. And that's the dark to light transition.
Mm-hmm.
It always evolves from dark to light. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
one.
It should do that. Yes.
Well, if you're in a business and it starts becoming a dark story, you probably should shut it down.
Get out. Yes.
Like if the
Mm-hmm.
evolved story is of wounding, it's probably not a good business to be
It's
in.
not going to attract too many people
The
to.
bottom line
However,
is the
there's a lot of people make that mistake though, Dan. They actually really do still stay in that wound story. A
oh
lot of
well,
people.
that's the more common mistake. It's not so much that
Hmm.
it's more that they stay in the wound story than that it evolves into a wound
Right.
story. Yeah, like the bottom line is when you are motivated by fear or trauma, it has a very high activation energy, but it burns you out. And the reason that you want to transition to a light energy story is ultimately it's more sustainable.
Right.
So my
No,
goal is to help you build a business you love that lasts.
hmm.
And I would say that wound stories burn brighter, but they also can burn you out. And so you want to transition from the story that started this whole thing that gave you the get up and go to do it to a more sustainable story that talks more about legacy, purpose, and
Yeah.
love. Yeah. But let's
And
talk about starting new businesses because that was your second question.
mhm.
When you start a new business, and I just actually experienced this myself, so I'll be like very upfront about this because the story of BizHack Academy, the marketing training company, was the story of a high level journalist getting fired and reinventing as a
Mhm.
business owner. And that story worked great for a training company. The story that I'm now telling of IBIS, of the consultancy around business storytelling, is of a 6-time serial entrepreneur
Mhm.
who has an expertise in storytelling that comes out of journalism that
Mhm.
he has leveraged for every one of those 6 businesses.
Yes.
Do you tell me, Anne, why is that a better story for a storytelling consultancy than journalist turned entrepreneur?
Oh, well, first of all, it shows the credibility. It shows the expertise along the way. It actually shows how you even evolved into this. I mean, it's the same for me. What the thing that I do in my business now, I've done in all the businesses. It was the one like common denominator in all of my businesses that made the biggest difference. And so now I teach people how to do that. So all of that evolved out of those businesses. So it shows the credibility. It's not like I just thought about this and then decided to do it or learn it to do it. It's built in and it's part of who I am and it's part of what I do. It's the same for what you're saying there.
Yeah, so the shift is from the story of journalist turned entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
to serial entrepreneur with a journalism expertise.
Yes.
And it makes such a big difference for the new business. It's like
Yes.
it's just a better story for the new business. And I mean, I'll be honest, like I was probably late in figuring this out. Like I had to revise huge sections of my book
Mm-hmm.
as I was writing it because late in the process I just realized that there is this better story to tell. And that's why I never used to tell the blow pop story, and now I tell it regularly because it's kind of, it's both a really
It's
fun story,
entertaining.
selling, it's entertaining, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also very much the story of most entrepreneurs. Like
Mm-hmm.
almost all entrepreneurs were selling something in high school.
Or when they were seven, my first money making thing was I was about 7 or 8. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so that since my audience is entrepreneurs, and I want you to understand that like I've had some real big failures and some pretty dramatic successes. And, I'm not like you. It sounds like you've sold all your companies. I've had some, historic blow ups. And I actually, part of the reason I love serving entrepreneurs is they're the most forgiving of failure.
Because they're used to it.
We're
Yeah.
high risk
Mm-hmm.
endeavors that where we basically are betting on ourselves. And the only actual failure in entrepreneurship is not learning from it.
Yeah. Or quitting. I think if you just quit.
I think
Um,
sometimes quitting is actually the right decision, but I do hear
mhm.
what you're saying. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like sometimes the dark energy is so overwhelming, you have to. Like you could be doing everything. Like the last chapter in my book is actually about a business that did everything right
Hmm.
and failed anyway.
It does happen. No, it absolutely does happen. There are things that are unforeseen. There are things that aren't counted on. But, to your point, I mean, you said, oh, it looks like you've had all, everything's been successful. Yes, I was able to sell all of those businesses, but it was really because I didn't quit and I found ways to continue to make them work and grow and accelerate and expand. In fact, my fourth and fifth business actually came out of the recession, where I was not making the same amount of money in my two businesses that I was operating. Another story, right? And instead of shutting down, which is what everybody was doing, I took advantage of the market and I expanded. I'm like, so here was my thinking. Well, I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket anymore because the one basket isn't producing what it was. So I'll expand and I'll have four businesses instead of two businesses. And that worked out really well because I was like, if I can keep my head above water and I can make this work, I'll have four instead of two. And so that's how it worked. But it could have gone very badly because we were in
Well,
a recession. Yeah.
ultimately, and I'm sure you will agree with this, like small businesses, founder-led businesses don't go out of business because we run out of money. It's because we run out of energy. And where do you source that energy? It's from your story, why you do what you do and why it matters.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the reason I feel so committed to this approach is, small businesses are the heart of our economy and
Mm-hmm.
also the heart of our communities. It's what makes Main Street interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a tragedy, I think, every time a small business closes. And usually it closes due to entrepreneur burnout.
Sometimes, though, you just lose passion for it. For
That's
example,
exactly what I'm saying. They
yeah,
lose,
but it
they
wasn't
lose,
really burnout. I just lost my passion for it. Like I had evolved as a person and I
right.
had grown, that I just wasn't loving it. There was nothing wrong with the business. I was able to sell them, all of that. But like my passion evolved. What started it is I worked with a business consultant or coach in those last two businesses. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my next thing. Like I am a natural teacher and even, all the things that I had done. And so I knew that that was where my heart was kind of like leading me and calling me. And I started that while I still had the last two businesses before I sold them. But my passion shifted somewhere else. And then I didn't even want to be part of those other businesses anymore. So it wasn't burnout. It was just a change in who I became, if that
Yeah,
makes
that's a
sense.
beautiful, thank you. Yeah, it's like the energy we need and the sacrifices we need to make in order to make any business succeed really require us to be really aligned with the work, or the work ends up becoming a prison.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't, when you start a business, account for your evolution as a human being. Another way I like to think about it is like you set out to solve a problem and then you solved it. And so then the problem
Right.
becomes less interesting to you. And that's like a really good moment to
Mhm.
either shut down or sell. Like a lot of people, I mean, to be perfectly honest, like, you know, I've had businesses that I wanted to sell and just wasn't able to, because I couldn't find the right mission aligned buyer or a price
Mhm.
that really honored the value of the company, and so it ended up just going on a shelf.
And that happens a lot. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
I was determined not to do that with everything I had done. But no, this is such an interesting conversation. And I think we really are talking about the evolution of things. I do want to, so kind of jumping around a little bit, one of the things you talked about in talking about evolution in companies and
Yeah.
changes in companies,
Right. Right.
we
Right.
had been talking about a story before we started recording this, and you were telling me about a well-known company that their value system kind of changed with their evolution. And so I would love for you to share that story and then what to do if that is what happens, which over years and years, that absolutely can happen. What you started with may not be the same thing that can take you into the future the same way. So
Right.
let's talk about that.
So the company is Starbucks, and the founder, well, he wasn't exactly the founder, but the person who really took Starbucks to the global public company that it has become was Howard Schultz. And if you want to see just a master class in business storytelling, listen to any interview with Howard Schultz. He is so phenomenal at this. Recommend his book, recommend the podcast where he's interviewed. And so the foundational wound or trauma or dark energy story that really inspired his approach to building Starbucks from, a coffee shop in Seattle that he purchased into, the tens of thousands of locations worldwide was when he was a kid growing up in Brooklyn. His father sold cloth diapers door to door and
Mhm.
slipped on some ice and broke his hip, and the cloth diaper company that he worked for immediately fired him with no safety net. And so from that moment on in Brooklyn, Howard Schultz grew up in extreme poverty because his father was disabled and they had no source of income. So that was the Howard Schultz origin story, his childhood influence story. And so when he started to he's an incredible hustler and started to build this coffee shop into what it became. He would make a case, with his employees, with his investors, with his board, that he wanted to build a company with a conscience. And I believed it. I saw it in action. I had close friends who went up in through the barista system. They were known as partners and had like a really beautiful path to a middle class life by serving coffee and managing coffee houses. And that worked great, and it helped Starbucks become what it became. And then last year in 2024, I guess that would be 2 years ago, Starbucks was hit with the largest violation of labor law in the history of the United States.
Mm,
And the specific violation was they were manipulating the hours of baristas, of their partners,
mm,
so they didn't get benefits. And they were found guilty. And Howard Schultz has publicly defended Starbucks in these behaviors.
mm.
And that's separate from all the anti unionization work they've done. And so suddenly Starbucks went from this beacon of corporate consciousness to the largest violator in the history of US labor law. And what I call that is a violation of a story contract.
Why do you
Like,
think they did that, first of all? What's the backstory there?
oh,
What made
it's a
that
very simple story. It's
made?
called prioritizing shareholders over employees.
Mm,
So I think that one of the reasons that working with public companies is tricky is because
mm,
it's not a stakeholder capitalism where the employees and the community compete for priority with the customers. It's a revenue first and a quarterly profit first orientation. And the
mm,
second you get a company run by a CFO, you start getting distortions of values because you're prioritizing revenue over all other values. Part
mhm,
of the reason why I love working with $50 million kind of smaller businesses is
mhm,
because they often are still founder led, and those values of serving their team, serving the community take a real priority. This broadly is called stakeholder capitalism, and it's definitely the story-based approach aligns best with that. So that's what happened is you see so many examples of public companies who've essentially over their evolution prioritized, shareholder maximization and getting their stock price to the highest point it can over and above other values and other stakeholders. And so what I would say is the warning still stands, which is as you evolve and grow as a company, you will sometimes find moments where you need to essentially do something that runs counter to what you've been saying publicly. And so the question is then what do you do in those
mhm.
situations? And my biggest advice is don't lie about it. You're
Very
going to take
simple
a
advice.
massive hit and people are going to be very angry at you.
Mm-hmm,
And you just got to be honest about it. And, another example of this is, Southwest Airlines,
mm-hmm.
when they started charging for bags and charging for
Right.
seats and like all the
And they
things that made
carried
them
on that
special.
they weren't going to do that. Right.
Yeah, all the things that made them special are kind of
Mm-hmm,
going away.
mm-hmm,
And as a result, I think their brand is severely tarnished. They even have a heart in their logo.
mm-hmm,
Like, I think many of us who are Southwest fans are heartbroken, just like
mm-hmm,
Starbucks broke my heart. Because I really did believe in Starbucks. I kind of bought into it. So the way I like to think about it is when you tell a true and authentic, purpose-driven story, you're entering into a contract with all your stakeholders, which is that the story is true and you're
mm-hmm.
going to stick to it. And so when you do need to break that for good or bad reasons, you have to be honest about it and then
Mm-hmm.
you're going to take a hit. But you
Yeah,
got
and
to be
it's not until
thoughtful.
everybody forgets about it. that you'll be able to
I
bounce
don't
back
think they forget.
if you can. Yeah.
I mean, maybe not everybody will know you did it,
They might not know, right?
but I don't think, no, I mean, I will never forgive Starbucks for being the largest violator of labor law. And if I have any options in terms of where I could get my coffee, I go to that other place.
Hmm.
And that's just the way I operate. But I actually think if we're talking about like the age of AI and this era of increased competitiveness, if you're going to leverage your story as an asset,
Hmm.
you have to understand it comes with certain responsibilities.
Yeah.
And it will allow you to grow faster, distinguish yourself from your competition, and charge more.
Hmm.
And you just have to understand that if you then go and violate that story, you're going to take a hit. And a lot of the
That's
people who believed
great.
in you from the beginning, from employees to customers, will potentially revolt.
That's interesting. No, we could talk about this for a long time, Dan. This has been such a great conversation and so many gold nuggets in this and just interesting tidbits
Yeah,
and things that I think
thank you.
this is going to make a great show. So thank you so much for being here. What would you like to say in final thoughts in closing?
Yeah, so first is, the work that I do with founder-led companies and entrepreneurs is to first help them understand what is their story. In many ways, I think of that work as like holding up a mirror and
Hmm.
letting them see themselves with clarity for the first time. I will say that it is extremely rare and difficult for someone to be able to figure out their own story on their own.
It is, or it takes years. It can take years to do that.
Exactly. And if you want to accelerate that process with,
Yeah.
former Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, that's sort of what we do in IBIS, YBYS. And then the second part, which is I think in many ways more important, is how do you lift that story and turn it into strategy?
Hmm.
In other words, how do you use it?
Yes.
And I will say that this is like if I had to talk about where my business consultancy's wound is, it was years of helping businesses tell their story, but not showing them how to use it.
Mm,
And that's really where the book and the
yes.
consultancy come in. It's like, I really think the telling of the story, I'm very good at it, but it's the showing how to use it, the story to strategy
Right.
part, where it's actually becoming like transformational.
Yes. No, I
And so
agree
if you're
with that.
interested in learning kind of more about that, go to ybys.com. And we
Mhm.
have great resources and it includes ways to contact me as well.
Perfect. Well, we'll put all of that in the show notes too. Dan, this has been such a pleasure and an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And I'm excited to watch your new journey.
Well, thank you. And I am curious, since we are storytellers, is there a story that you wanted to share inspired by, today's of maybe a business that you've worked with where you've seen them leverage an authentic story to grow?
Yeah, I actually am thinking about one of my clients, and her backstory is amazing, and it has so much to do with how she operates in her business today. Now she does have it built in, and we have used it in multiple things, media and all of that. But yeah, it is something that I think is super important to do.
I love that. And what it really speaks to is there's sometimes an objection that I get, and we can end here with, I don't have an interesting story.
Mm, I think
And
everyone does, though.
yes, and
Mhm.
especially entrepreneurs. And I can give you a scientific reason for this. The reason why the entrepreneurial story is always interesting is because it taps into the famous mythic hero's journey.
Right. We see ourselves in it, right?
When it comes to the founding and starting of our business, we are all heroes in that journey.
Hmm.
And that is why every entrepreneur who took that leap and created something from nothing, that 0 to 1, Peter Thiel's
Hmm.
formulation, that 0 to 1 move is always dramatic and interesting. One of my favorites is one of the featured companies in my book. They founded their business in the most boring way possible by sitting around a kitchen table.
Now I
And
find that interesting, though.
yeah,
You are mapping
uh,
it out on a napkin.
literally like, and they have,
Yeah.
but what they did is they took that semi-common kitchen table story and they turned it into a museum piece. They're now a, $50 million a year company. They took that kitchen table and they put it into a conference room and they took a
Oh.
picture from that first meeting and they
Mhm.
framed it
Oh,
and
that's
it's called the
awesome.
Founders Room. And they took like what is essentially a kind of ho hum founder story and they turned it into a mythology that now every new employee, every customer, every visitor sees the table where the company was born.
No,
And
that,
it's just a kitchen table. It's like
yeah.
you who imbues it with meaning. And
Hmm.
if and it's a software as a service company and the service they provide is text messaging services. So like
Mm.
if you can be basically competing against spam providers, sending text
Hmm.
messaging services, and you started at a kitchen table and you can turn that into the founding mythology of a company, all of us have a founding story that can be used in that way. And my
Yeah.
goal is to teach you how to use that strategically so that you can grow your company and attract your ideal
That's a great
employee.
story. I love it. It's like the people that frame their first dollar, right? And there's a story behind that.
Exactly.
So
And it's just a dollar, but it's
it's
the
just a
meaning
dollar.
behind it. It's the
Hmm.
story that gives that significant object
Yeah.
meaning.
Yeah. I love it. This is interesting, Dan. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being my guest. And I wish you all the best in this new venture that you are getting ready to jump into. You have been doing this on some level, but now you're kind of really shifting your business around all of this. So
That's right.
I'm excited to watch what happens for you. But
Well,
thank you.
thank you, Anne, and good luck on your seventh and sixth enterprises and the ones to come.
Yes, the craziness of it all. Yes, thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you subscribe to the show. And look, if you need to take your business to new levels, the premium market is where the opportunity is going to sit. That is where the most money is going to be made to move out of mainstream, out of the low end markets, and move into premium. So if you have real expertise, real experience, and you deserve to be playing at the top of the market, but you have not yet elevated your business to be able to do that, then I want you to reach out to me and book a strategy call at acarden.com. And let's take a look at your elevation plan, how you can be seen, get chosen, and get paid with high caliber clients in your business and grow to the levels that you deserve. All right. Have an amazing day. God bless you. Go rock your business. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Although I share strategies, ideas, and success stories based on real experiences, results are never guaranteed. Every business is unique, and outcomes depend on individual effort, market conditions, and many other factors. By listening, you agree that I and my guests are not responsible for your results or actions based on the content shared. Thank you for tuning in today. If you're as excited as I am about scaling up your influence, business, and bank account, then I have just the thing for you. But first, make sure you subscribe to the show. Second, make sure you share it with someone you care about because sharing is caring. And third, head on over to join me in my next free virtual exclusive workshop where we'll explore proven strategies to boost your business and maximize your potential. Look, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're looking to take your business to the next level, my workshops are designed for you. So head on over to expertinyouworkshop.com to reserve your spot and get ready to transform your expertise into extraordinary success. I'm looking forward to seeing you there and helping you achieve incredible growth. Until next time, make sure you're always seeking the expert in you, and God bless. Have an amazing day.